London in the 1700s was a city full of sharp contrasts. It was one of the largest cities in the world, with more than 500,000 people living there. The city was growing quickly and bursting with energy, but it was also crowded, dirty, and often chaotic. Fires, disease, and crime were common problems. At the same time, London was entering a new age of change and improvement. Wealthy neighborhoods were being built in the West End, with elegant squares, wide streets, and impressive houses. Famous architects, especially Sir Christopher Wren, helped redesign large parts of the city after earlier disasters. Their grand buildings gave London a new and confident appearance. Today, modern technology allows us to imagine this lost world in great detail. With the help of advanced AI tools, historians can study real 18th-century paintings and engravings and recreate scenes from the past. These images help us understand how London probably looked, its architecture, streets, markets, ships, and the daily lives of its people. It is like stepping back almost 300 years and seeing the city through the eyes of the Londoners who once walked those streets. One remarkable view shows London from above in the middle of the 18th century. The River Thames flows through the center of the scene, acting as the main highway of the city. From the area that would later become Tower Bridge, we can see the heart of Georgian London. At this time, London was the largest port in the world and a major center of global trade. Goods from across the British Empire arrived daily, making the city rich and powerful. The skyline is dominated by the magnificent dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, designed by Sir Christopher Wren and completed in 1710. The cathedral stood as a symbol of recovery after the Great Fire of 1666, which had destroyed much of the old medieval city. Nearby stands the monument to the Great Fire, a tall column built to remember the disaster that changed London forever. The Thames is crowded with sailing ships, cargo vessels, and small rowing boats. The river is alive with movement, carrying goods, workers, and travelers. Old London Bridge can still be seen, lined with houses and shops, just as it had been for centuries. This scene captures London at the peak of its Georgian prosperity, when the city was transforming from a medieval town into the capital of a rising global superpower. Another famous view comes from One Tree Hill in Greenwich Park, looking northwest toward the city. This location would later become one of the most important scientific points in the world. In 1884, Greenwich was chosen as the home of the prime meridian, the line from which all global longitude is measured. Below the hill sits the elegant Queen's House, placed between the grand colonnades of Greenwich Hospital. Completed in 1751, the hospital served as a home for retired sailors. The buildings, designed by Christopher Wren and Nicholas Hawksmoor, were meant to show Britain's strength as a naval power. Greenwich acted as the gateway to London for ships arriving from around the world, and from this high viewpoint, visitors could watch the busy approach to the capital. In the foreground, well-dressed visitors admire what was considered one of the finest views in England. Artists and writers praised this scene for centuries, and even today, the landscape remains surprisingly similar. It connects the modern city to its long and powerful history. Leicester Square in the mid-18th century was another symbol of fashionable London life. It was one of the most desirable residential areas in the city. Wealthy families built large townhouses around the square, and the neighborhood became known for elegance, culture, and social gatherings. Walking through Leicester Square at that time, a visitor would see stylish carriages, finely dressed residents, and a lively atmosphere that reflected London's growing wealth and confidence. The square represented the new urban lifestyle of Georgian Britain, organized, refined, and proudly modern. Together, these scenes show a London that was expanding, transforming, and finding its identity. It was a city balancing old medieval traditions with bold new ideas. The London of the 1700s laid the foundation for the global capital it would eventually become, and its streets, buildings, and river tell the story of a city learning how to shape the modern world.
The large and impressive building in the center of the square is Leicester House. It was built in 1635 for the Earl of Leicester and later became the home of several members of the royal family. One of its most famous residents was Frederick, Prince of Wales. Because of this royal connection, the area quickly gained prestige and attracted wealthy and influential people. Leicester Square became more than just a residential space. It turned into a cultural center where artists, thinkers, and fashionable society gathered. The square was especially important for the art world. The painter William Hogarth lived and worked at number 31 on the right side of the square. His house was marked by a decorative bust of the famous artist Van Dyck above the door. Across the square, at number 47, Sir Joshua Reynolds opened his portrait studio in 1760. Reynolds became one of the most respected painters of his time, creating portraits of politicians, writers, and members of high society. At the center of the square stood an equestrian statue of King George I, erected in 1753, reminding everyone of royal authority and national pride. By the mid-18th century, Leicester Fields had completely changed from open farmland into one of the most desirable addresses in London. Elegant houses surrounded the square, and living there was a sign of status and success. However, this period of aristocratic life would not last forever. Within a few decades, the character of the square began to shift. Entertainment, theaters, and public attractions slowly replaced private mansions. Leicester Square started its transformation into the lively entertainment district that it is known to today.
Moving south, we arrive at the bank of the River Thames and look across the water toward the Tower of London. This fortress was one of the most powerful symbols of British authority. For more than 700 years, the tower controlled access to the city from the river. Its thick stone walls were built to impress and intimidate. At the heart of the complex stands the White Tower, a massive Norman castle begun in 1078 by William the Conqueror. Stone was imported from France to ensure strength and durability, showing the importance of the structure from the very beginning. By the 18th century, the tower served many purposes at once. It was a royal palace, a prison, an armory, a mint where coins were made, and the secure home of the crown jewels. The waterfront entrance shown in this scene was once the arrival point for prisoners brought by barge through the famous Traitor's Gate. Some of England's most well-known historical figures passed through this gate, including Anne Boleyn and Sir Thomas More, before facing execution. The river around the tower was constantly busy. Royal barges, fishing boats, and merchant ships moved along the Thames, reminding viewers that the river was the lifeline of London's economy. We then step into the busy courtyard of the Royal Exchange in the 18th century, a place where international trade came together under one roof. The Royal Exchange was founded in 1565 by Sir Thomas Gresham and was inspired by a similar trading center in Antwerp. It was England's first building designed specifically for commerce. Twice a day, merchants gathered in the open courtyard to buy, sell, and negotiate deals. A bell ringing from the tower above announced the beginning of each trading session. The atmosphere inside was loud and energetic. Traders shouted prices in many different languages. Papers rustled as contracts were signed, and quills scratched across documents. The surrounding arcaded galleries contained shops selling luxury goods, books, maps, and imported items from around the world. Lloyd's of London, the famous insurance market, conducted business from these galleries, helping protect ships and cargo traveling across dangerous seas. This single building played a major role in turning London into a global financial center. It became a model for future stock exchanges and trading houses in cities such as New York and Hong Kong. The Royal Exchange represented the confidence, ambition, and commercial power of 18th century London. Together, Leicester Square, the Tower of London, and the Royal Exchange show how the city balanced culture, authority, and trade, three forces that helped shape London into one of the world's greatest capitals. St. James's Square in the middle of the 18th century represented the very peak of aristocratic life in London. It was one of the most exclusive and prestigious places to live in the entire capital. The square had been developed in the 1660s, and from the beginning it attracted the richest and most powerful families in England. Dukes, earls, and even prime ministers competed to own houses here. Living in St. James's Square was not just about comfort, it was a public statement of status, influence, and political power. The scene we are looking at shows the improvements made by royal gardener Charles Bridgeman in the 1920s. He redesigned the center of the square to match the elegance of the surrounding homes. Bridgeman installed a large decorative basin about 150 feet wide, creating a calm focal point in the middle of the open space. Around it, he placed 8 tall stone obelisks fitted with lamps and enclosed by ornamental ironwork. These additions turned what had once been an embarrassing muddy field into a refined garden square. Before Bridgeman's work, residents had complained that the area looked neglected, disorganized, and unworthy of such grand addresses. His transformation gave the square beauty, order, and dignity. In the distance, the spire of St. James's Church rises over the rooftops, adding a spiritual landmark to the aristocratic setting. Over time, however, even this symbol of elite residential life would change. Within a few decades, many of the great private houses were converted into clubs, offices, and institutions. The square slowly shifted from a quiet, noble neighborhood into a center of business and social organizations, a role it continues to play today. We then moved to Cheapside, one of the busiest commercial streets in Georgian London. The name comes from the Old English word cheap, meaning marketplace, and for hundreds of years this street had been a center of buying and selling. Cheapside was loud, crowded, and full of energy. It was the place where merchants built fortunes and where everyday Londoners came to shop. Rising above the street is the elegant steeple of St. Mary le Bow, one of Sir Christopher Wren's architectural masterpieces rebuilt after the Great Fire. Its famous bow bells were deeply connected to London identity. Anyone born within the sound of those bells could proudly call themselves a true Cockney. Along this wide avenue, shops displayed luxury goods from across the world. Silk fabrics, fine jewelry, rare spices, books, and imported items filled the storefronts. The buildings lining the street were among the most expensive retail spaces anywhere in Europe. Cheapside was not simply a shopping street, it was a financial and cultural engine of the city, a place where trade, ambition, and opportunity met. In many ways, it combined the roles of a modern luxury shopping district and a financial center. Here, London's merchant class expanded their wealth transaction by transaction, helping transform the city into a global economic power. These historic snapshots remind us that cities are always changing, shaped by the people who live and work in them. They invite us to imagine other lost worlds waiting to be rediscovered. If you could step back in time and revive another historic city, which one would you choose? The past is full of stories still waiting to be seen again.